This next step in the series, we're going to pick up with where we left off. So we've been talking about the standing meditation, and then we've integrated some test of power exercises. Now we're going to take a test of power exercise and integrate that into the walking meditation. And this is very valuable because as we start to develop that root and learn how to elevate the spirit while staying relaxed, and then seeing how to move the energy through the body, then we start learning how to carry that through our movements, whether it's through athletics or if it's just through the day. It's easy when we get so distracted through the day that we start losing our root, we start building up tension, we start letting that awareness drift. Through practices like this, we start understanding how to maintain that relaxed feeling through the day, that solid root in our feet, and then at the same time elevate that spirit. And notice how when our emotions start to get involved and it brings tension and it brings distraction, we can pick up on that right from the beginning and come back to this settled way of being, which helps us in everything we do. For the first part of this lesson, we're going to talk about a test of power exercise, which we've looked at in the last couple of videos, but this is a different pattern. So it's the same concept. We're going to start in our hip width stance with the outsides of the feet parallel, unlock the knees, find that central equilibrium. So we're in that point where we can stand with our posture upright with the least amount of effort, finding that balance. So energetically, our center is going to be just behind the balls of the feet. Now, again, as we've talked about in the previous couple lessons, when you go into a test of power exercise, it's good to begin with at least a few minutes of a standing meditation to help find that awareness and develop that root a little bit better. But for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to skip over the standing portion and just begin with the movement. Now, through the movement in this practice, as we've done with all of the other test of power exercises, we're working that visualization of those bungee cords and thinking about how do we put power in the movement and break it down into each millimeter of movement, and then thinking about the power in all 6 directions, so front, back, left, right, up, down. So every millimeter through this movement, we're visualizing how to have that strength and power in all 6 directions. Now, if we have a bungee tied to each fingertip, our wrist, our elbow, our shoulders, our torso, our hips, our legs, as we bring back and sit down, we're thinking about stretching those bungees. They're tied to the wall in front of us, and we're stretching them out as we pull up towards the top of our head. And now those bungees are tied to the ceiling, and we're settling and we're pressing down. Now they're tied to the wall behind us, and we shift and we push forward. Back, down, out. Just as before, we start off with maybe 5 pounds of pressure on the bungees, and then you build up incrementally until it's at that point where you're really putting a lot of power. Maybe you're at 50 or even 100 pounds, and you're at that point where after a few minutes of this, you start to sweat. After you're there, when you start to build up too much tension, you let go and you come back to that light weight again, and then slowly start building up the power. Now, we're going to move into the stepping. This practice here we're doing in a horse stance. If you watch the previous videos, you'll see how we do this in a Yichuan stance, or more of the athletic or combat stance. When we're doing the stepping, it's very important, if you look at my feet here, that when I step, I'm not going to transition where the feet are on one line. So I'm going to begin with the toes out at about a 20-degree angle. So that way when I step, I'm going to kind of zigzag across the floor. And as I zigzag and step into that short Yichuan stance, at any point, if I was to draw that foot back, there would always be about a one fist width position between my heels that you can see here. So when I step forward at that 20-degree angle with that foot off to the side, now when I shift and I step off to this side, I don't want to step here, so now I'm coming back into the foot. I want to step a little bit open, so if I draw that back, I still have that gap between my heels. And that's what's going to give us that stability and that root through the movement. If we get on that railroad track and we start getting too narrow, that's where we lose our balance, we build up tension. When the tension comes, our breath gets disrupted. When our breath gets disrupted, our mind gets distracted. So having that good foundation is extremely important. So I'm going to walk through a couple steps just so you see what we're doing. When we start, and again, notice how short the step is. It's not about how long we're stepping. The idea is we don't want to have to fall into the step, which happens when we make it too long. When we're doing this step at any point, I want to be able to pull that foot back almost as if I was a cat. So when you step, you slowly shift into that foot, and then we move off the other angle. Now, as we're doing this walking practice, we're going to add our test of power exercise that I showed you at the first part of this video. So I'm going to do a couple steps from the side so you can see. So as we begin, you can get into your Yichuan stance, and now I'm angled about 20 degrees off to my left, and I'm working back, down, out. And I might stay here for a couple cycles and just practice and get in the rhythm. Now, when I pull back, I'm also going to bring that foot up as I start walking. 1, settle, step, out, shift. And again, I might pause here for a few cycles. Or you might just step with every cycle. Now, when I get to the side, I might just turn and go back forward in the other direction. But for me, usually what I like to do is when I get to the end of the room, or whether I'm doing sets of 5 or 10 on the steps, when I get to the side, then I start going to the rear. Still taking those 20-degree angles, keeping that hip width stance, staying rooted through the movement. Maybe I do 6 steps to the rear, and then 6 steps back to the front. Keeping that visualization with those bungees so you're feeling that power. And as you do this practice, begin to get the coordination where it's a little bit of that light resistance. But just as we were doing this in our stance without the movement with the feet, as we started building up that power, we can do the same thing with the walking. So we start building up that power through the stepping. And this helps us with any physical activity we do. Because again, remember in the last video when I talked to you about learning how to break this down, you start seeing these things from different perspectives. And now our physical movements, whether it's swinging the bat or shooting a basketball or whatever it is, we start to see these things in more detail and become more clear and understand maybe we have a weakness on this one movement, or maybe this one here doesn't have the power in all 6 directions, or whatever it is. And this is extremely helpful in the combative arts, but it's again also great as we go through these practices. When we expand the awareness of all of these things inside of ourselves, it also helps us see these things in more detail outside of ourselves. And this is where the practice really starts to become interesting. I hope you're getting some value out of this content. Thank you very much for watching, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.